Good to go?
Good to go.
Season 1 of Tools of Fighter Pilots closed with an AMA, a moment of reflection, curiosity, and perspective. And Season 2 is about application. This season is about taking the tools we have talked about, structure, discipline, decision-making, pressure management, and stress testing them in a real transitions, real careers, and real performance environments. And my guest today is someone who embodies this transition. Welcome to the show, Damian.
Thanks, TC. Pleasure to be here.
Damian Ellacott is a former Royal Air Force fast jet pilot and instructor, ex-Red Arrows, who made a deliberate structured transition from military aviation into the corporate and executive world. What makes Damian particularly interesting is not just where he went next, but how he approached the transition with the same discipline, preparation, and system thinking that define fighter aviation. Damian, once again, welcome to Tools of Fighter Pilots. This episode is not about nostalgia or stories, it's about transferability. So you and I both come from a world where performance is trained and is not improvised. Yet many fighter pilots and elite performers more broadly struggle when they have to leave their original area and they transition into a new profession or a new lifestyle. So today I would like to explore what actually transfers from fighter aviation, what doesn't, and how those same tools apply to business leadership and high performance, let's say, professions, sport included.
Fantastic. So once again, thanks very much for having me, for inviting me to join your podcast, which I've listened to several times. I've always enjoyed listening. So great to be here. I mean, listen, I had a fantastic career in the Royal Air Force and as a fighter pilot and Red Arrows pilot. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And would do it again and again, if I had the same opportunities. But at a certain point in time, I decided it was time for a change. It's not because nothing negative about the Royal Air Force and the time that I enjoyed. It was just looking for something different. And when I made that decision, it was not really knowing what was next. That's a big step, as many people in our position find when they leave the military, that structured existence that they've had for so long, and then going out into a corporate environment or just a different environment is a big step. But it was, at the time, it was just incredibly exciting to then go and have this kind of blank sheet of paper in front of me to go and try and be as successful as I could be.
It was really I've been following your career as well because we met like about 10 years ago working here in the UAE, and then at some point when you left the world of flying. So it was really interesting the way that you approach and the way that you've been successful as well. Thinking you were talking about system and structure, one misconception about fighter pilots is that it's about individual brilliance. In reality, it's about operating inside a system. And from your experience, what mindset shift helped you the most when moving from the military aviation world into the corporate world?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a common misconception, and we all feel that, I suppose, to an extent when we're in the military, and there are a lot of the time it's individual capability and experience and performance that helps to deliver what we need to deliver at the time. But I now relate quite frequently to General Stanley McChrystal, and he describes, and he wrote a book on it, calling it Team of Teams. And I'm sure you'll be able to understand that completely. Is that even though individual pilots flying single seat fighter jets, for example, with a specific mission, you are only a small part of a bigger team, and then a bigger team, and a bigger team. When likewise, we'd be on a kind of a cameo, a big mission with maybe 100 aircraft. Exactly that point that you are just a small part of a team of teams. And I took that into the next world after leaving the military, and then that became more and more apparent again. Is that again, you're part of a bigger organization. For example, when I've worked at large airports like Dubai airports, and I was lucky enough to be the vice president of the operations control center there, busiest international airport in the world, 250,000 passengers and over 200,000 bags being processed per day. And I was leading, a team who were responsible for, in a way, you know, in the operations center, micromanaging many parts of that very complex operation that's happening out there on the airfield and in the terminal buildings, in the baggage systems, for example. But we were still only a small part of a much bigger team of teams.
Do you think that the fact that you had an experience with the Red Arrows enhanced this ability for you to work with the teams?
And that kind of sense of trust has to just become natural and implicit. And the Red Arrows does take it in some ways to that next level, because you're flying quite sophisticated and advanced aerobatics information at high speed close to the ground. So clearly there's a lot of factors there that that could pose risk and danger. And of course, you'd have always imagine a sort of box of air around your aircraft, and an imaginary box around the one next to you, and you just trust that your teammate is not going to go outside of his box. And you would come and move closer and further apart from each other from time to time, and sometimes get a little bit close, but it really enforced that sense of trust to have in each other.
Yeah, for sure. As you said, wingmen and technicians as well is really important. That's how you enhance the teams and teamwork. Over here, I had it written, the champions don't feel motivated, because I wanted to get there to the topic of the fact that when you transition, probably you see the goal, you see the long term, let's say, purpose, and also the long term performance. But when you start, the motivation is a little bit low. No? Today I was looking at this video of this athlete that was saying, I'm preparing for the Olympic medal, and my coach explained the law of third. So you need to be 1/3 happy, 1/3 meh, and 1/3 crappy. Otherwise, you don't get to the long-term performance, or to your goal. So sometimes we don't feel motivated every day, but we execute in this kind of systems. So I guess the takeaway is that high performance becomes repeatable in the moment that is system driven, like you said. Is something that you have brought from your aviation career. In the cockpit, pressure is immediate. In business, in sport, obviously, it's a little bit slower. I always like to say that in my work cycle, in 2 hours, you have done everything. You have planned, you have briefed, you executed, and then you have debriefed. But the fact that it's lower in business, it makes it a little bit more ambiguous. There are opportunities to make a little bit more mistakes, let's say. So what aviation decision-making tools translated best outside flying in this type of environment, uncertain environment, let's say?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that when you're in the cockpit, you're flying at high speed, close to the ground, and decision is needed. Maybe you have a bird strike or some kind of issue within the cockpit, and you got to make a quick decision. It's very rare that you have to make a split-second decision in a business environment. But at the same time, decisions still get made too quickly without having gone through a structured thought process. And so in a similar way that if you're in the cockpit and maybe you need to make a quick decision, but you remember the metaphorical sit on your hands. Is the aircraft flying? Yes. Point it into a blue piece of sky? Yes. And now I'm going to assess what's going on around me. Now I might make that assessment and decision in 5 seconds, but I've still deliberately slowed myself down, stopped myself from making what could be a poor decision too quickly. And then I've assessed, got the right information, and then be able to make a better decision. And that still applies in a business environment. So you don't have to make a decision in 5 seconds, but you still need to make decisions in an informed way. Get the right information, be prepared to say, I know the deadline is at 1 o'clock today to make this decision, but I don't have quite enough information. Now, we will be comfortable coming from the military environment with being able to make decisions without the full picture, without 99.9% of the information that perhaps we might want. But, we can, if there's a certain amount of ambiguity, we can still be comfortable. But, in the business environment, just being able to say, wait, I just need to understand a little bit more clearly X, Y, or Z, and then I will make a much better quality decision just by delaying slightly. So, it really has a parallel there to what we were taught in the cockpit.
Yes, that's what CEOs find every day in volatile markets, but also athletes, endurance athletes, and midway on an endurance race, which lasts for like 10 hours. Sometimes, the plans break, the bicycle breaks, or and having this clarity under pressure to say, okay, let's stop for a moment. I call it like, okay, let's put wings level. Okay, because wings level.
Yeah, absolutely.
On Typhoon, you push the button and then it's going, okay.
Yeah, blue piece of sky.
Yes,
Am I
blue piece of
flying?
sky. Okay, good. So now you can prioritize with a little bit more confidence that you know. Another tool set that I would like to discuss is obviously one that I like a lot. I did a lot of episodes about briefing and debriefing and feedback loops, let's say. And we feel like it's one of the most underutilized fighter pilot tools in the civilian life. What was your experience with that, and why do you think is powerful? Why do you think? Why do you, let's say, you are convinced that it's a powerful tool?
No, absolutely, it's incredibly powerful, and it gets talked about, a lot between this how it's successful in the military and in other environments, and it can be successful in a business environment, and like you say, elite sports, for example, and so many other activities. But yeah, what when I left the military and then went into a different environment, I definitely took that a structure with me, because I'd been used to that, and that had brought success. By having a certain structure about how I prepared, and then how you executed, and then debrief and learnt. And clearly, learning is almost the most important part of that cadence. So took that structure, and yeah, it's not easy just to go into let's say a business environment, into a team, and suddenly try and impose a military like regime. But certainly where it's missing, just bringing a basic structure to say, let's have a structured brief about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And I think clarity is of what's required of people is so often missing. So we would walk out of a mission brief, and we would know exactly what our role was, because of the structure in that brief and that kind of check of understanding at the end of the brief. And we would walk out absolutely clear. Whereas what is missing, and in my experience in a different environment, is that sometimes meetings happen for meetings' sake. They're not structured, and more often than not, people walk out of that meeting actually thinking, well, what was that meeting about? What happened? What am I meant to do? What's my contribution following this meeting? What are my actions? So making sure that you bring structure, and that when everybody leaves the room, there is clarity. Yeah, it does so much to
How do we
bring
do this
success.
practically? I mean, normally when I do that briefing, I have a whiteboard, and then with pens, okay, lesson learned, and you titled any action that you need to do, and now you have the team and yourself becoming accountable in order to take action to those things that you learned. Because also for an athlete, when you give a feedback without a structure, a proper debriefing, it's kind of becomes criticism. So like people are gonna approach the meeting, and I hear a lot of friends and executives. They're like, "Oh yeah, we have a meeting, and how was the meeting? Oh my god, my ears are bleeding." Like, so what did you learn? Because at this point, after being 2 hours in a meeting, you must have learned something. Same. Same. No, you need to get something. But it's hard also middle management to have this feeling that the meeting was really not useful, and now impose to the leadership or propose to the leadership, okay, we need to do something a little bit more practical, right? Did you have this experience, growing up in the executive world?
Well, definitely, sometimes less is more. And like you say, sometimes, and I mentioned it earlier, is that meetings can take place for meeting's sake, and they can be too long, and it's quite natural. It's kind of autopilot and a default to make every meeting an hour. And is every meeting really an hour? When you could do it in half an hour, be much more succinct, be much more clear with the team, and then walk out with a clear picture of what's required from everybody. So yeah, and you mentioned the whiteboard. I love a good whiteboard. I love a whiteboard, and if unfortunately, in a lot of office environments now, we're moving away from we're moving away from
Digital.
whiteboards, right? Which is a shame. But I always have a whiteboard or a white wall, not just to put notes on to remind myself of what's important and what I've got to do, and the priorities for the day, the week, or the month, but also to be able to to sit with a team sometimes and actually just brainstorm.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Is so useful.
That's another thing that probably I'm gonna talk in one episode of brainstorming. It's one of those things that probably in the executive worlds that doesn't come up so clearly. But we have a structure also for that. So structure for the feedback, it's kind of the performance fuel. It's not really an excess or an extra thing. That's what we can transmit and transfer.
Yeah,
And
and
you've
I
been
think
doing it.
and I think with that structured briefing and then executing the activity, that's relatively straightforward, and teams do that well in the business world all over the place, and sports teams and in other environments, they're all very good at that. But it's that debriefing which is not so easy to translate into a different environment. And clearly we were used to in the military, where the debrief, there's no rank, right? And if you're the mission leader and you are a captain, and somebody in your within the debrief who was within that mission is a group captain, then you actually, in that environment, you are more senior than that person, and that person defers to your views and your judgments. Clearly there can be debate, but ultimately, as the mission leader, you have the most seniority in that room. And that's not easy to, perhaps in another environment, have the a VP or even the CEO in the room being debriefed by somebody much more junior.
Yeah.
And not many executives would be comfortable, because they might feel like it's undermining their authority. Whereas we saw it very, very differently. We always saw it and were taught to see it as being extremely constructive, to be that kind of humble leader and express that vulnerability by being able to take criticism, because not everybody flies every mission perfectly or executes everything in a business day perfectly.
I think, I've read a couple of books of Mark C. Crowley. He has a Lead from the Heart podcast. So, you think about it, oh, yeah, but this is an holistic approach to leadership. But the reality is, like, everything that he says is backed up by science. We were discussing before, the book that I was talking about, The Power of Bed, or Flow, or, his book is, employees about employees' well-being. All these things where the leader shows up not with the heart, like like saying, okay, good job, but heart meaning, okay, I want to listen to what you have to say, and let's work on a solution together. Scientifically and statistically is improving productivity in the organization. So really, it's something that, by structure, as a fighter pilot, you have it, and then if you are able to translate it like you did in your career, because you've been an executive now for more than 10 years now, so it's something that you brought there, and then you have used it. Let's address something uncomfortable but important. Many pilots struggle after leaving flying, and this is a message for all the pilots effectively that are leaving their flying career. Maybe they have finished flying, or they want to change their lifestyle, not because of skills, but because their identity was tied to their role. So you chose to study for an MBA as part of your transition while we were working together. Why?
Well, absolutely, it was to support that transition from a military career into something else. As I left the military, I had a huge number of doubts about myself, about my capability, about how would my experience translate. And well, this is extremely common to those that are leaving the services, because often it's not, where is the natural fit, unless you continue with a flying career, but perhaps a commercial flying career, where it's clearly very, very similar in so many ways. If you step outside of that and go for more of a corporate intent with your career, it's not so obvious. So I had a huge number of doubts about how successful I would be, or how my experience would translate. And what the MBA actually, as an experience in the MBA, that kind of turned my thinking. And I remember very clearly in one of the opening sessions, one of the welcome sessions with all the students in my cohort for the MBA. Of course, it went round the room, maybe 100 or more people, and one by one, everybody stood up and introduced themselves, gave a bit of a background on what their career had looked like and maybe what their intentions were going forwards. And what I came to realize, not just during that, but then as we went through the course, was that many people who'd come purely from a corporate world, from a business environment, who I thought would have a huge advantage over me, a huge head start. Actually, many of them, most of them, had spent the previous part of their careers in a very narrow functional area. So maybe they'd been in finance or HR or procurement or a narrow functional area. So actually, their wider experience was limited. And from my background, I didn't feel like I had so much of a disadvantage. And as we went through the MBA, and of course we did lots of group exercises, and what I found was that my experience came forward, and my ability to to bring different people together, that kind of systematic approach, is to say, right, who knows the background, who's got experience or knowledge of this particular problem that we're trying to solve in this group exercise. Bring people together and lead people, take advantage of all the knowledge that they've got in their areas, and then together we come up with a solution. So that was quite eye-opening for me. Thought I had a big disadvantage going into the MBA. Actually then came to realize that I just needed to leverage my other skills and experience to, clearly there are a lot of good people there, but in some ways I could then accelerate ahead of some parts of that cohort.
Good on you, really, because understanding that you needed, education to be able to leverage, like you said, your skills, is something that is really lacking in the military world. Like, for example, I did a little bit of consultation regarding creating this app that would help military transition into the civilian world, and they did a survey on how much as a military you would spend in your education, and it came out like a crazy amount, like 50 euros. 50 euros is nothing. Education costs a lot. So when you're investing there, you either find open source material, but when you participate into an MBA like yours, where you go practical, you need to spend a little bit. So there is this perception of maybe you don't need that kind of education, transitioning from our profession to the corporate world. And so it's a little bit misleading, because you cannot transition if you don't get all the bits and pieces together, right? And also, I think one of the problems that you can find is, like we said, identity, because you in a way, like a mother that has been taking care of the kids, and then the kids get out of the house. Now your identity is to be a mother. Now you need to convert the kind of skills into something else. It's not that you a different person the moment that you change your profession. It's you need to reinvent yourself, and you need to adapt with the new challenges and new, let's say, circumstances. So otherwise you stagnate. And
I agree completely. And I made that deliberate decision to invest in myself at that point in time, to give me that it's that knowledge that I would need, that language that I would need, to then, as another layer on top of those skills and experience that I have from the military, to then take forward into this new world that I was stepping into. And the best executives that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years, and but learning doesn't stop. So you have to be aware that learning doesn't stop. And you often read about the most successful executives, people like Bill Gates. They read incessantly, read and read and read, and they make the time for that. So there would be somebody, and I remember actually reading an interview between with Bill Gates. And of course, he'd become quite friendly with Warren Buffett over a number of years. And Bill Gates, he definitely makes a deliberate effort to read and improve his knowledge, makes time in his day, in his week, in his calendar to be able to do that. But he then made a comment about Warren Buffett, and I think Warren Buffett is even more of a prolific reader than Bill Gates. And they were comparing calendars. And Bill Gates was astonished that Warren Buffett's calendar, given that he was the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway for so many years, had multiplied the value of that company so many times, but his calendar was empty.
Okay.
Whereas you would expect that an executive like that would have back-to-back meetings every single day running a corporation of that size. So just an interesting takeaway. But I think my point there at the beginning, the question that you asked was, that the education doesn't stop. I'd make a deliberate effort to to take courses. Did one recently on corporate governance and how to improve effectiveness in the boardroom, because you go to another level of seniority, and much like in the military, we all remember there was structured training right through up to the highest ranks to make sure that those high-ranking officers were always prepared for the next level of seniority.
Yeah, no, I like that because you use an expression, you needed the layer. So if you keep it in layers, it's much easier, especially when you grow up. Like when you're at school, it's just kind of a continuum until, you graduate from university or high school. But for us, that we are outside the education system now, okay, let's add one layer. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you treat it like that, in a like you did in a time frame, say, okay, from here to here, I'm gonna get this one. Now that we know that fighter pilots are goal-driven individuals, so on that one, it's easy for you to add this layer. So really, adapting to circumstances, evolving is a way not to stagnate.
I think important through that journey as well is the self-belief. It's very easy. As I said, I came out of the military and I did have doubts about how I was going to adapt and transition. But at the same time, I was very excited to have that challenge in front of me and to have that, to an extent, that unknown ahead of me. But having come through the military, and you will remember from your experience in the early part of your career, you come through an extremely rigorous assessment process. You have to be pretty good at what you do to reach those levels. And you just have to be of the mindset when you come out that you're going to back yourself. I've got this far. I achieved X, Y, and Z. I was great, really lucky. I flew the Jaguar, had a great amount of fun, and then was lucky enough to fly in the Red Arrows. So using that, and going, well, I achieved that, so I can achieve success in a different environment. So back yourself, have confidence that you can do it again, and then go out there and do it.
I like the self-esteem type of thing. Sometimes people that have too much self-esteem without reaching those results, it can be a little bit misleading.
And then it becomes arrogance.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a big difference between
arrogance with ignorance.
Yes.
So,
yes.
There are many people with that, with that type of skills, let's say. Talking about self-esteem, obviously, we have the model of fighter pilots in the Hollywood way, where the fighter pilot is trained to be confident, but also we are brutally honest about mistakes. So how important is humility in long-term performance? Exactly what we were talking about. Let's expand a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's fundamental to good leadership as well. Is that the ability to be humble, to be vulnerable at certain times. I mean, vulnerability is not always a word that you might associate with a senior executive, but to an extent, being able to show you're vulnerable, it's like the debrief, right? If you're one of the more senior people in the room and you're one of the first to put your hand up and said, I did that wrong, or I could have done that better, then that goes a long way to certainly role modeling for the younger pilots in the room, to make it clear that it's okay to say that I didn't do it as well as I should have done. And that translates forwards into other environments. So in any meeting, being able to be a humble leader, or in an activity in the business world and corporate world, and being able to say, yeah, I didn't get that right, is an important lesson to teach others. And they will very quickly recognize through your role modeling of vulnerability and humility that actually it's okay, and that makes you a better leader than just trying to lead by taking charge.
Do you have an example where you challenged one of your team players and then they were able to give you a contribution because you showed that you didn't know about the topic, so you needed him or her to contribute?
Think of a specific example. I can't think of a specific example, to be honest.
routine operations.
But I mean, I think particularly in quite a high pressure operations environment. Dubai Airports was one. Dammam Airports another. Complex airports. Airports are all very complex in their own ways, with so many different stakeholders and moving parts. And when something goes wrong, it might not always be as a direct result of an action or an inaction from you or your team. But the ability to be able to to problem solve and fix, and by being able to pull people into a room and say, just the act of saying, I don't know the answer. Who in this room has got an idea or has got answers or experience, has seen something like this before, is a very powerful lesson. I think is goes some way to answering that question.
Probably at the beginning, when you start doing that, people are not raising their hands. But if you keep going, then all of a sudden you're going to find a crowd of people trying to help and be involved. Is that what, this is what Tamara Miles wrote in her book, Meaningful Work, the 3 C's: community, contribution, and challenge. All these 3 things, in the moment that you let people raise their hands and talk through, then everything changes perspective, right? And this is true in aviation, it's true in business. As you said before, it's a learning process. So, layers and layers. And because sometimes, even if you can see the results declining, even if you think you're doing good. Okay. But if you don't keep, as exercising this type of techniques and this type of structure, then it's we were talking with Jason Richardson about, you drop the bombs on time on target, but how were the standards followed? You get there, okay, today we were, let's say, lucky, but the reality is either we follow the standards or you may get one result, but it's not consistent, and you're not what you calling in endurance durability, consistency getting the results.
And it takes deliberate efforts, to in the military, in the Air Force, that structure and that cadence was natural. It was kind of fixed. It was assumed. It was just part of the culture and the way of working. Outside of that environment, it's not. So if you're going to try and bring that a similar structure into an environment with teams of people who've not had the same early career and experiences as you have, it takes deliberate effort to do that, because you do face resistance, you do face pushback, you do face rolling the eyes and another brief or a debrief, but it does take deliberate effort. And then just with a little bit of persuasion and time, and the results should speak for themselves. You just have to make sure it's adaptable. You're not going to bring a military brief, execute, debrief. And I do reflect sometimes on officer training and the SMEAC abbreviation. So when we were carrying out the leadership exercises during officer training, SMEAC was the structure, and it was situation, mission, execution, administration, and check of understanding. And really, just some variation of that can just be extremely effective. I'm not going to stand up in front of a team in in one of my roles since leaving the military and run through a SMEAC brief word for word. But what I can do is I can say, right, this is the context. This is where we are. What's the objective? We need to get from here to here. How are we going to do it? Well, I've got certain resources and capabilities in the room. We're going to bring those together, and then we're going to execute it in this way, and then have a quick check of understanding. Right, who's in charge of, who's the lead for this part, who's the lead for that part, and then walk out.
I get this SMEAC in my pocket. I didn't know it about with this acronym, but that definitely is something that the listeners can take with self. And talking about the listeners, if you like the podcast, make sure that you subscribe and share it. Okay, now we are doing a little bit of challenge and response. So quick fire, one line answer. One fighter pilot habit every business leader should adopt.
Always be willing to learn new things, learn from other people.
One aviation mistake businesses constantly make.
An aviation mistake businesses constantly make. Making decisions making decisions too quickly.
One lesson sport can learn from aviation? You have been running a few marathons in the past. You have been training a lot. I've been following you on Strava, so I know.
That was
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think I've recorded anything on Strava for a while. It's more now gym related than running related.
But being an endurance coach, I like also to transfer this type of concept also in my work with the athletes. So, what sport can learn from aviation?
Well, I think still, that structured approach to performance, to like we said earlier, is that high performance doesn't happen by chance. It happens because there have been a number of deliberate actions over time to produce a certain result and to be able to repeat that result. So bringing that structure, that cadence, to be able to repeatedly perform at high levels.
Okay, sounds good. We are at the end of the episode now. If Damian, if there is a message you'd leave with someone transitioning from cockpit to boardroom, from sport to life, from executive work to life, what would it be?
It would just be a couple of the reflections that I talked about earlier. Is one, don't stop learning. Just be very aware that you've got a fundamental set of skills and experiences from the military, which trained you extremely well, extremely thoroughly, and prepared you to perform at really high performance within that military environment. So, but leaving that environment, always be prepared to learn and put those layers on top to take you to the next levels. And also back yourself. You've been successful in one environment, you can do it in the next one.
And that's what exactly Tools of Fighter Pilots is. Damian, thank you very much. This conversation perfectly captures the mission of Season 2, which is not about, as we said, nostalgia or war stories, but turning elite performance experience into transferable tools. To our listeners, if you are operating under pressure in business, in life, in sport, this episode is not about inspiration. These are some instructions that you can take. I am TC, Damian Ellacott. See you next time.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.